All right, well, this week we are in the final part of a series called Not For Me. Not For Me. We're talking about the reasons that people don't like or don't want to come to church. Maybe they're reasons that some of your friends have. Maybe they're reasons that you have. Maybe for you, church has been not for me. Or maybe today, you're not a not for me, but you're like an okay, fine mom because it's Mother's Day, right? And maybe these are some of the reasons that you don't like church. Here's what I can tell you. Whenever there's a rejection, there's always a reason behind a rejection, no matter what it is, right? If you break up in a relationship, there's a rejection, there's a reason, you know? If you don't get a job you want, there's a reason. Things don't go the way you wanted to and the control isn't someone else's. There's usually a reason behind a rejection. And so we've been trying to put some language. We've been asking why, like what are the reasons behind the not for me's? And if you haven't been here over the past couple weeks, just to bring you up to speed real quick, or to remind you in case you forgot, when Jesus was around, he had this magnetic presence. Everybody liked him. People who were nothing like him liked him. Now, there was one exception to that, and there were certain people who felt threatened by the change that he was bringing and the power that he had. But for the most part, he was like Justin Bieber famous. Everywhere he went, crowds flocked to him to the point that he had to be like, okay, don't tell anybody what I just did because it's going to be impossible for me to travel. And so people wanted to be around him. He showed people a way of life that was different. He cared about people in a way that was different. And so a lot of things happened. You should read the story for yourself. But eventually there came this point where Jesus was like, all right, I want you to continue what I have started. He's speaking to his followers, these guys we call the disciples. And he's like, you're going to go out there and you're going to treat people the way that I did. In fact, everyone will know you're my followers by the way you love one another. And what's crazy is that they did this. They went out and they cared about people in ways nobody else did, like in head-turning ways. And they became magnetic just like Jesus. And so that's his vision of the church in like its greatest form. But Jesus warned them and said, no matter what, there will always be some not for me's. There will always be some people that were like, no thanks. And what Jesus said was that the reason behind the not for me would be him. It's like there are gonna be some people that don't wanna be part of your thing and they're not gonna like you because they don't like me. The big hang up was gonna be Jesus and who he said about himself. His followers who came after him said he was the stumbling block. He was the stone the builders rejected. Him. People get hung up on him. Now, let me ask you a question, especially if you're not normally a church person, okay? The reason that church is not for you, if church is not for you, or the reason church is not for the people that you work with, if church is not for the people that you work with, is their main hang up Jesus? Like, oh, I just can't deal with that guy. Can't deal with what he said. Or is it more like, well, those people there, they're judgmental. They're fake, self-righteous, hypocritical. They're after your money. In other words, the main reason that people don't want to be part of church, the main reasons for the not for me's have gone from being Jesus, which he said, to now mostly being not Jesus, but church. And it wasn't supposed to be this way. And so the question we've been asking, and if you're a regular here, I want you to remember this. I hope that you memorize it. We even made it rhyme. Ready? Here's the question. Behind every not for me, is he the reason or are yes? Because if we are, there's something we can do about that. And so every week we've been picking apart these things. For the first week we said, okay, well, what do we do with the whole idea that church people are judgmental? Does it have to be that way? And the answer is no. You can go back and listen to that message if you want, but it's pretty clear. The Apostle Paul was like, what business is it of mine to judge the world? So how in the world does the world feel like we're after them, judging them, that church people are judging the world? And so we said here, to make sure it doesn't become like that, one of our values, one of our core principles is you can belong before you believe. You can call this place your home and not be into the stuff that we teach. Part of that is because our second principle that came from that week is that you have permission to be in progress. You can kick the tires for a while. You can hang out and figure out if you believe this, wrestle through it, because this kind of stuff, it takes time. Right? The next week we talked about the idea of being hypocritical. Now most people would say being a hypocrite is when you say one thing but you do another, but actually that's not the definition. A hypocrite is somebody who pretends. The original word in the ancient Greek is the same word for actor. Someone who wears a mask and pretends to be someone that they're not. And that week, that was a tough week. All right, we looked at a really tough story. But the idea in that story is that it's okay to be flawed, but not be fake. You don't have to pretend. Because you can belong before you believe, because you have permission to be in progress, you can be real with all your issues and say, this is where I am, and this is what I struggle with, and this is what I doubt, and here's what I can't handle. And I know that last week was a tough story, and let me remind you, if you have an issue with something that we talk about up here, you're always free to come talk to me. And I will happily direct you to Tom, and he will answer all your questions. No, I'm just kidding. But really, that's true. You can come talk to me. But also, if you went home, here's the cool thing. If you went home that week, you can be flawed, but you can't be fake. If you got in your car or went to your group or hung out with your friends and you were like, I didn't like that, you're choosing to not be fake. That's being real. Like, you get it. You win that week. Then the next week, Tom was up here. He talked about church being irrelevant or boring. And really, there's two parts to this, right? There's the church's responsibility, and then there's the other side of it. Church can be boring because sometimes I'm boring, but church can also be boring or seem irrelevant because it requires taking a step, not just hearing, but doing. And when we put stuff into practice, we're like, whoa, this actually does something. It becomes relevant and less boring. So today, we're wrapping it up. This is a big one. All right? It's a big hang up. I'll tell you a little story. I'm excited to talk about it. You might not be. But anyway, a couple days ago, actually last week, I was at the gas station, and it's really early, super early in the morning. It's like 5 something, still dark out. I want to be a morning person, like deep down, but my body's like, no, we're not. So if I wake up early, I have to just flood my bloodstream with caffeine. And so I get up and I go to the gas station and grab an energy drink. It's not even coffee, it's real bad. So I go, bring it to the cashier, it gets scanned, and I'm just trying to pay and kind of go on my way. And I'm asked if I want to donate to a charity. And I'm already not thrilled that I'm spending like $6 on a drink. It's 5:30 in the morning. I'm not ready for decisions. And I'm looking down and I'm just thinking, all right, well, what is this charity? There's a little pixelated image of a child, but like, where's this money going? Is this actually going to children? Is there any information? Or am I just gonna say yes? The emotions were complex, like uncomfortably complex. And maybe I just think too much about things, but in that moment, it required a lot of mental energy. And I ended up just saying, fine. Like, okay, whatever. I'll walk out of here with $7 less instead of $6. But really what I was doing was not giving. I wasn't acting out of generosity. I was purchasing for myself some emotional relief. Like, I just wanted to not have to deal with all the weird feelings that I'm gonna be flooded with as I walk out to the car if I don't give the money. Well, what if it really was going to a kid? Now I'm gonna spend $6 on an energy drink, but I can't give $1 to a child? And I've gotta like justify it to myself, right? It's uncomfortable. The emotions behind money are very uncomfortable. Maybe you've been in a situation like this. Maybe it wasn't giving to some anonymous charity. Maybe it was, tipping at a restaurant. The iPad spins around, it's like 18, 20, or 22, and you're like, oh, should I give a little more? Are they gonna get all this? Are they not gonna get all this? How does this incorporate into their salary? Maybe you're asking those questions, maybe you're not, but it's like, I'm not sure. Maybe you've had a family member ask you for money, and you got these questions, like, of course, yes, I wanna be the kind of person that's like, here, fine, but I did have plans for that money, and am I really enabling them? Like, maybe it's not a good thing. And yes, there's part of me that doesn't want to give away money, but is that like greed, making excuses? And there's all these feelings and ideas. It's emotionally complex. I went to a city last year, and the people asking for money in that city was unbelievable. It was like nonstop. We got there late one night. As soon as we got there, we went out to eat, and we were approached by somebody with a child, and they wanted money, and we gave them money. And in the next 48 hours, we had been approached, literally we can't count how many times we were approached for money. And it was exhausting emotionally, because there's this ethical conversation going on. Is this real? Is this not real? Like, do they actually have a problem? Am I being selfish? Am I being greedy? There's all this stuff happening here. And what I could tell you is eventually that fatigue can start to turn into resentment. Like, I don't even want to be asked anymore. And now I'm walking on the other side of the street because I don't want to go there. If that's not complicated enough, think about the emotional complexity that comes with being asked for money by someone who then says, God wants you to. And that's what some of you have experienced in church. That's a reason I'm sure some of you had said, like, no, I'm done with church. I'm tired of being asked for money. I'm tired of thinking, who are these people? Do I even believe what they believe? Where's this money going? I don't want to be asked again. I don't want to have something passed in front of me. And so now at this point, I'm walking on the other side of the street. And what's amazing, we're talking about reasons people don't want to be in church. In this area especially, one of the highest reasons, the thing we hear over and over and over again, is that the church, they just want your money. They're in it for the money. We have this video on Instagram. It's also on YouTube. It's like a what to expect video. So if you're going to come for the first time, you can watch. Maybe some of you have seen it. My hair's long. And people, they could see like, oh, here's where you park. Here's where you walk in. Okay, it's just kind of, the idea is hopefully it'll disarm people and be a little easier to come for the first time. And it's amazing, the comments on there, some are really nice, some are not so nice. That's the nature of social media. But frequently, we'll see comments like this. And I've deleted these comments so you can't go find these people, but they are actual comments, right? One person said, as long as you got that 10% tithe, it don't matter what you believe in. Come on down. Somebody else wrote, put the money in the basket, put the money in the basket. There's another one, I couldn't find the comment. I saw it when it first went up. Maybe it was deleted, I don't know. But somebody wrote, community church, the best show your tax-free dollars can buy. I told Tom that. He's like, is that a compliment? The church has earned itself a reputation of just wanting people's money. So what do we do with this? Right? Is it just necessary? You just have to live with this reputation? What's amazing is that the original church, they were known for being generous, radically generous. People were drawn to it because of their generosity. And so the question is, what happened? What's the difference between us and them? And if you're like me, I come to this with a lot of questions. And I want to know for them. Here are some questions we could ask, right? If you like to study this stuff and look into it, what you can ask is, well, when did the church ask for money? Like, in what situations? And when they did it, how did the church ask for money? Or you could ask the question, you could go even a layer deeper. Why did the church ask people for money back then? That magnetic church that grew like by the day. Or we could skip those questions and ask a much simpler question. did the church ask people for money? And the answer is no. The church had a reputation for being radically generous. And if you like to look into this stuff, you can go and study and find you won't see an instance where there are people inside the church, these early followers of Jesus, who are looking to the community with a handout saying, come support our mission. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And so they never ended up with a reputation of asking for money, a reputation for asking for money. Jesus, when he was talking to his followers, he sat them down one day. This is in one of his most famous sermons, and he says some crazy things. He says turn the other cheek, right? Maybe you've heard that before. He says, go the extra mile. Here are his words, especially when it comes to money. He says this. He says, if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, now this isn't like New York State lawsuits, like slip and falls or what, this isn't anything like that. This is a different kind of lawsuit. But the idea is if someone wants your shirt, he says, give them your tunic or hand over your coat as well. He says, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. That's where we get the phrase, the extra mile. And he gets back to giving. He says, give to the one who asks you and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Give. Now, Jesus here is speaking in hyperbole, meaning he's using extremes. He says this right after he says, turn the other cheek. He's not saying get out there and let everyone slap you around. That's not the point here. He's also not saying give till you don't have anything. He's saying you should live in a way that turns heads. Like what? Be generous in a way, speaking to his followers, speaking to this group of people that would become the church, give in a way that people are like, are you serious? And that's what these people did. And it made a crazy impression on them. The idea, and if you back up even more, what Jesus taught is that God wants you to see him as a father who provides. And you, speaking to his followers, he's like, you people have the opportunity to show the world what it looks like when you have someone providing for you. And so give, and watch, and people will see. Whoa, it's like they're being supplied for. He told people, the language we might use today is he told people to live with an abundance mindset. Feeling like there was enough to share and go around, rather than in a scarcity or with a scarcity mindset. Saying, model this to people and be generous, and they did. And so here, because we believe that, the thing that we say, and what we've been saying from the start, one of our core values, our guiding principles, we say that we want something for you, not from you. This is the message to the community that the early church sent. We are here for you. We're here with open hands. We're here to give. This is why if we see something that is communicating the opposite message, that we're trying to get something for you, we will do whatever it takes to mess up that understanding of the church. If you've been here for a while, you know twice we talked about money, all right? It took a while to start talking about it because people are like, well, there they go. They're just going after your money again. We didn't talk about giving to the church. We talked about generosity in general, and we're sitting there okay, what do we do? How do we communicate the importance of generosity? Because generosity matters. People look back on their lives by what they gave, not by what they got. And so if we care, we need to talk about generosity. But how do we do it in a way that communicates we're not just after your money? And so if you were here, you know that at the end of the service, we passed buckets around with those envelopes in them. And those envelopes had money in them. And we gave $10 to every person here in an envelope and said, now go use this. In other words, we wanted to teach generosity by modeling generosity because that's how the earliest followers of Jesus did it. And it was crazy. It was crazy. There were people, grown men and women crying in the back. They're like, I just can't believe this. I can't believe this. And for me, it was nice. It was touching, but it was also alarming. How bad is the church's reputation? that walking out of the church with a $10 bill was like life-changing and mind-blowing. We were supposed to be known as people with open hands. Like, we're here for you. We're not trying to take from you. And so we did that twice. It's also why we do Sunday dinner, right? We have basically a dinner for like 200 people, 180 people last time. If you've ever hosted 180 people, it costs a lot of money. And we don't charge for it because we know that there are people that are experiencing this community for the first time, and we don't want them to be thinking like, all right, how much are they making from this, you know? And so we didn't charge for it. The 12 days of Christmas, if you've been part of that out in the village, what we do is we partner with shops in the village. We buy a ton of their product, and then we post on social media, and we're like, go to that shop and get that. We pay for it, and then it brings business to their shops. When we first tried to do it, some of the shop owners were like, no, we're not interested, because they didn't believe us. And they're like, why are you doing this? Now we've earned the trust of the community, thankfully. We're like, why are you doing this? And I'll tell you right now, it is not because there's a ton of money. Like, we don't have a room back there where Scrooge McDuck is swimming through gold coins. There are times where money is very tight. I've sent out Slack messages to our staff, be like, all right, we're in essential spending mode, only buy something that's like absolutely necessary. But we budget for this stuff because it is mission critical. It's part of a message we feel obligated to correct in the community. So, maybe you're sitting there like, all right, well, if there's no room, where does the money come from? The money comes from the we. The we. When I say we, I'm not talking about me or Allie or Tom or Joanne or Dakota or Christine. I'm not talking about like church leadership. I'm talking about the people who have decided we want to send this message to the community. Or like maybe to clarify, if you're wondering, okay, at what point are we, should we be giving to the church? The answer is very simple. The point at which you want to communicate this to the community is the point that you start supporting it. And so if you have experienced like generosity here, if this has been communicated to you, it's because there are we's sitting all around you who have said, we're here to say that. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. There are literally little tiny kids who bring like quarters to their teachers because they're getting behind this. Because they believe the church was made, or their parents believe and are trying to show them that the church was made to be generous. That's what Jesus meant when he said, you are the light of the world. You're the salt of the earth. You give this place flavor, and you do it by giving, not by taking. That's the whole idea. And so I'll be totally honest with you. Like I believe in this message with everything I have. And if you're a we, the more that we give, the more we can communicate this to the community. The louder we can broadcast this, the more we can do for the kids downstairs, for the people outside. And there are people here, if you're totally new to this, there are people here that do giving that is planned and percentage giving, meaning like spontaneous generosity is nice, like, oh, I see something, okay, here's some money, here's some money. But there are people that take like their budget and decide, okay, this is what we're making, let's take a percentage. It could be 0.5%, could be 1/4%. It could be, there are people here that budget 10% of their entire income and say, okay, we're gonna take this to like invest this in communicating that message because we believe that the church is the hope of the world. That the church was put here to give, not to take. And so they do. But that's not the point. That's not the point. The point of this series is that if you're sitting here today and you're not a church person, you should have never, ever felt like you were obligated to give to a church, ever. Ever. In fact, here are some reasons not to give to the church. One, if you're a not for me, if church is not for you, if you don't believe this, it really makes no sense for a church person to ask you for money. It's like asking you to come over and mow my lawn or support my mission, right? It doesn't make much sense, and that should have never been communicated to you. The second is if you feel guilty. We actually get a verse for this. It's not good to give out of guilt or obligation, even if you do believe. The Apostle Paul writes in the letter, he says, each of you should give what you've decided in your heart to give, like what you're good with giving. And then he clarifies, he says, not reluctantly or under compulsion. If you're like, I'm not sure, he's like, well, don't give. If you feel like I really should, under compulsion, under obligation, all right, I really should be doing this. My son ate 3 bagels last week. Like, don't. And it's not just, here's the psychology behind it, right? Or the theology behind it, or both. It's not just like to be nice, but if you are giving to make yourself not feel guilty, what you're really doing is giving to earn a sense of acceptance with God. If you feel like God will be pleased with me if I give, you're trying to earn that. And at the heart of what we believe is that God's acceptance cannot be earned. It was already purchased for you. And so if you're giving now out of obligation so that you feel like God is good with you, maybe the best thing for you to do is to stop giving for a while. And go home every week knowing God feels no differently about me today than he did when I was giving. Because that's not what my acceptance in his eyes is based on. It's based on who he is and what Jesus has done for us. And so you don't give if you don't feel guilty. And the other reason is you shouldn't give if you're not there yet. We said you have permission to be in progress here, and we mean it. And so if you're trying to figure it out, for some people they believe and it's like, boom, like the Apostle Paul, he fell off his horse and he was like, his life went crazy in the other direction. That's the exception, it's not the norm. And if you're trying to figure things out one step at a time and you're like, I think that maybe there is something to this, keep thinking and keep stepping. But if you're not there yet, that's okay. That's okay. Money's a big thing. And I would rather you be here every single week for the next however many decades and never give us anything than think that we expected money from you because you were here. Or if you're not there yet with us, if you don't trust us, if we haven't earned your trust, if you don't trust me, if you're looking at me and you're like, I don't know about this guy. He can't decide what he wants his hair to look like. Sometimes he limps, sometimes he doesn't. That's okay. That's okay. I would say if you want to support this, then give to another church that you do trust and believe in. The Apostle Paul actually did this same exact thing. He modeled it. And I read this verse a few weeks ago when we first started, but he said to the church in Corinth, he's like, look, when we first got there, they believed. They were not for me's, they were yes for me's. But he says, I could have asked you for money, for support, but he said, I didn't. On the contrary, he says, we put up with anything rather than hinder the gospel of Christ, meaning the message that we teach about Jesus. He's like, if there's even a chance you're gonna think, oh, this guy is not really in this for the right reasons, he's like, that's why I didn't even ask. Because you might not be there yet with me. We're not making up our own rules. We're doing it the same way that they did it when the church was in its heyday. I'm going to ask the band to come back up here. We'll wrap up. But here's what I want to leave you with. A couple of years, 2 weeks ago, the 3 services has been tough, all right? A few weeks ago, I told you a story about a guy named Barnabas in the early church. He was so on board with what was happening, he sold some of his land and he brought it and was like, here, use the proceeds, right? And so they did. And I just remember thinking when I read that, like, wouldn't it be crazy if people still did that? And within minutes, I thought about the history of the church. Not the history of like 2,000 years of church, but the history of this church, the past 3 years, if you want to count COVID. We started because there were a few people in an older church that got together and decided they were going to give up all of their comforts, this property, and this building to broadcast that message to this community. And they literally gave us land and a building. And that, to me, sent a powerful message. And right about that same time, when we first announced that we were going to start a church back where Allie and I were living, someone came up to us, someone who's actually on our team now. He invited us over, and he and his wife sat with us on a couch, and with tears in his eyes, he handed us a $10,000 check written out to Community Church. And he said, it's always been a dream of mine to give $10,000 at one time. And immediately I thought, like, I want to have dreams like that, because that sends a powerful message. And then we got this building, and there were some crazy things that happened, but we had to basically transform it in 2 weeks with like all volunteers. And we were spending money that had been fundraised faster than anyone was comfortable with, but it felt like we had no choice. And at the end of it, a couple approached us with an $80,000 check to pay for the entire renovation downstairs. And that, to me, sent a powerful message. And even recently, I was sitting with a couple who have a business, and they have a gift with finances, with making money. And over the course of the conversation, eventually, they weren't bragging, but I pulled it out of them, and they said, yeah, we would have retired, but then we started coming here, and we realized that this was worth supporting. And so they continued to work. They prolonged their retirement. Why? To communicate the message that we want something for this, that God wants something for this community, not from it. And so if you've ever felt, if that has ever been communicated to you here, Community Church, it's because of those we's, and people like them, and their kids who want something for you, not from you.